I grew up in one of those neighborhoods where everything looked perfect on the outside. You know the type, trimmed hedges, luxury sedans in the driveway, dads in polos waving politely while mowing the lawn. Ours was a white colonial with navy shutters, pristine from the curb. But inside, it never felt like a home. It felt like a theater stage where I played a silent role in a performance I never agreed to be in. My mother, Karen, believed fear was a more reliable tool than love. She wasn't the type to raise her voice often, but when she did, it wasn't yelling. It was something sharper. Controlled, cruel, surgical. Every word landed like a slap, and sometimes it was an actual slap. She had this look, a tight squint with her lips pressed together, and I knew if I saw it, I was done for. Crying was a sign of weakness. She called it emotional manipulation. If I even sniffled, she'd accuse me of trying to manipulate her. I learned early on to swallow tears and keep my face neutral. My dad, Tom, might as well have been wallpaper. He worked for a mid-sized IT firm in Cambridge, something with network systems. He never really explained it. He left before I woke up and got home just in time for dinner, where he'd sit quietly, nodding along to Karen's daily tirades about how children these days are all entitled, or how I had no appreciation for how hard she worked. Sometimes he'd mumble something like, "Karen, maybe take it easy," but that was rare. Mostly he just kept eating. There were no bedtime stories, no hugs, no goodnight kisses. The only time my mother touched me was when she was fixing my posture, yanking my shoulder blades back with so much force it made me wince. Chin up, back straight. Don't walk like a loser. That was her version of love, I guess. Discipline as devotion. By the time I was 6, I already understood there were 2 versions of me. The one I had to be around my parents, quiet, obedient, perfectly dressed. And the one that flickered out in secret, when I could be alone in my room and line up my stuffed animals to tell them stories I made up. That was the only place I could talk without being told I was annoying or disrespectful. We weren't isolated either. Karen had a circle of equally controlling women she called her friends. In reality, it was more like a competition of who had the best behaved child. I remember a woman named Denise who once scolded her daughter for getting a 94 on a math test. Karen loved that story. "See, Emily," she said. "That's what high standards look like." School was supposed to be my escape, but it had its own traps. Karen insisted I be presentable at all times. That meant brushed hair, ironed clothes, and posture drills in the morning. I was late to class once in 3rd grade because she made me redo my entire hairstyle, yanking a brush through my scalp like she was sanding a wall. When I came in with tears still caught in my lashes, my teacher asked what was wrong. I said I had a cold. I wasn't allowed to have playdates unless Karen approved the parents. Most didn't pass her test. Trashy, she'd say. Or low standards. So I spent most weekends at home, walking the line between invisible and in trouble. Things escalated when I turned 9. That's when she found a drawing I had made. Just a girl with wings, flying over a city. She stared at it for a long time, then asked, "Is this supposed to be you?" I nodded. She took the paper, folded it twice, and dropped it in the trash. "You're not special, Emily. Stop pretending you are." After that, she searched my backpack every day after school. If there was anything silly in there, doodles, notes, even a paper with too many smiley faces, it got thrown away. Once she even tore up a birthday card a classmate gave me, saying it was tacky and that people only liked me because I tried too hard. I started keeping a notebook in a Ziploc bag under the sink in the bathroom. I wrote with one of those mini pencils they give out at IKEA, hunched over on the tile floor with the door locked. It was the only place she never checked. It wasn't just emotional control. Sometimes it was physical. Once, when I accidentally knocked over a glass of juice on the dining table, she made me stand in the backyard barefoot for an hour in December. "Maybe you'll learn to be more careful when you're cold," she said. I stood there, shivering in my pajamas while she sipped her coffee inside. My dad watched through the kitchen window. He didn't do anything. When I was 10, I met Rachel. She lived 2 streets over and had an older brother who skateboarded and let her listen to his music. Rachel was everything I wasn't: loud, messy, brave. I'd only see her at school, and we'd whisper in the library during lunch or pass notes in class. Karen didn't like her. "That girl's going nowhere," she said. "She'll be pregnant at 17. But Rachel was my first real friend. Once, when she saw a bruise on my arm from where Karen had grabbed me, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "That's not normal." I shrugged it off. "It's just discipline," I said, repeating the words I'd been trained to believe. Rachel invited me to her birthday party that year. I begged to go. Karen finally agreed, but on the condition that she walk me in and speak to Rachel's mother first. That conversation lasted all of 3 minutes. Karen walked out of that house like she was escaping a biohazard site and dragged me home without saying a word. She grounded me for asking, "I don't want you around people who think wearing jeans to a party is acceptable." Then came 5th grade. There was a teacher, Mr. Keating, who noticed things. He saw me flinch when someone raised their hand too quickly. He caught me throwing away a drawing before Karen could find it. One afternoon, he pulled me aside and said, "Hey, if you ever need to talk about anything, I'm here, okay?" I nodded, but never took him up on it. I couldn't. Because in our house, talking was a weapon, and silence was safety. Still, that year something shifted. Karen's control got more erratic. She'd be hyper-involved one day, ignoring me the next. I once went 3 days without her speaking to me because I left a smudge on the bathroom mirror. But then out of nowhere, she bought me an expensive dress and forced me to wear it for photos on the front lawn. Smile like you mean it, she barked. I looked at the camera and smiled like my life depended on it. Because sometimes it felt like it did. At night, I started to dream about running away. I'd pack snacks and books in my backpack and imagine where I'd go. Maybe to Rachel's house, or maybe I'd find my grandmother, who I'd only met once but remembered as soft and warm. But when I tried to ask about her, Karen shut me down. She's dead to me, she said. And that makes her dead to you too. When I turned 11, I started getting migraines. Blinding, puking migraines. Karen said I was faking it for attention. When a doctor finally diagnosed me, she argued with him in the parking lot. She's just dramatic, she snapped. She needs discipline, not pills. The worst part wasn't the pain. It was how she acted offended by my suffering. And through all of this, my father said nothing. Maybe that was worse than anything Karen did. The silence. The cowardice. I remember once, I broke a glass bowl while trying to do the dishes. Karen screamed so loud I felt the sound in my ribs. But what I remember most is that my dad was home. He walked into the kitchen, looked at me, then at Karen. Then he turned around and went back to his office. Door closed. Lights off. By the time middle school started, I was a ghost in my own house. I moved like a servant, cleaning, eating quickly, retreating to my room. My only peace came from the pages I still wrote, hidden now in the air vent behind my bed. Stories about girls who flew, who escaped, who found real families somewhere else. I started to believe I was broken. That maybe I was born wrong. That maybe this was all normal, and I just wasn't strong enough. Karen liked to say, "You're lucky we care this much. Some kids don't even have parents." I repeated that in my head like a prayer. But deep down, I knew something was off. I could see it in other kids. The way they hugged their moms goodbye, the way their dads clapped at school plays. I knew there was another world out there, but it felt so far away, like a country I couldn't afford a ticket to. And still, I waited. I waited for someone to notice. For someone to say, this isn't how it's supposed to be. But no one ever did. Not yet. When I got on that plane to Seattle, I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't scared, I was terrified, but because I couldn't let myself feel anything that big. Crying was still dangerous. It meant you couldn't control it, and control had kept me alive for 20 years. I was 20 and going to college 3,000 miles from everything I had ever known. I had chosen Seattle on purpose. Not for the rain or the tech scene or the ocean, but because it was literally the farthest university I could get into without leaving the country. I told my parents it was a prestigious school for environmental studies, which was true, technically. But the truth was, I just needed distance. I didn't pack any photos. I didn't bring the card Karen had slid into my suitcase without a hug. Don't embarrass us. Make us proud. That was the whole note. I left it in the airport trash can before boarding. I sat by the window the whole flight, pretending the clouds were a wall rising between me and them. I got a tiny dorm room on the top floor of a building that smelled like mildew and burned popcorn. My roommate, Lacey, was from Eugene, Oregon, and greeted me in her socks while brushing her teeth. She looked like she had just stepped off the set of a 2000s teen movie, oversized hoodie, messy bun, zero makeup. She said, "Yo, you must be Emily." Sick. I thought I'd get a weirdo. I didn't know how to respond, so I left. And that was the start of something I didn't expect. Lacey was chaos. She burned her ramen, spilled coffee on her textbooks, walked around in glitter socks at 2 a.m. blasting early 2010s indie music. But she was also warm. She asked if I wanted to split a pizza that first night. I said I wasn't hungry, even though I hadn't eaten in 14 hours. She ordered one anyway. "Cool, more for me," she said, but slid 2 slices onto a napkin and left them by my laptop. That night, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. I had made it. I had escaped. But the quiet was too loud. I couldn't sleep. I kept waiting for someone to knock on the door and demand to know what I was doing. Classes were overwhelming at first. Professors who expected you to debate, to challenge them. People raised their hands and said things that contradicted the reading. And no one flinched. No one got told to shut up and know your place. That's when I realized how deep it went. The rules I thought were universal were just my mother's. 2 weeks into the semester, I had my first panic attack. It happened in the campus library. I was reviewing notes, and someone nearby dropped a book. The sound cracked in my head like a gunshot, and suddenly I couldn't breathe. My heart slammed against my ribs. My fingers went numb, and I thought I was dying. I stumbled into the hallway and collapsed by the vending machines, sobbing into my hoodie. A woman's voice cut through the fog. Hey, you okay?" She knelt beside me. I couldn't even speak. She said, "Can I sit with you?" "Just sit." I nodded. Her name was Dr. Rachel Cohen, a psych professor who happened to be on her way to class. She sat with me for 20 minutes while I shook and gasped and finally calmed down. Then she said something I'll never forget. That wasn't just stress. That was a trauma response. She gave me her card and told me to visit the campus counseling center. I stuffed it in my hoodie pocket and told myself I'd throw it out. But I didn't. A week later, after another panic attack, this time in the dining hall when a guy slammed his tray down and laughed too loud, I went. My therapist's name was Dina. She had short gray curls, thick glasses, and the kind of calm voice that made you feel like maybe the floor wouldn't fall out from under you. For the first 3 sessions, I said almost nothing. I told her I had some family stuff, that I was adjusting. She didn't push. Then, on the fourth session, she asked a question that cracked something in me. Emily, growing up, were your parents scarier than they were loving? I froze. No one had ever asked me that before. Not like that. No one had ever dared to say it out loud. I didn't say anything. I just nodded. And then I said it. For the first time in my life, I said it out loud. Yes. That moment changed everything. I didn't go home for Thanksgiving. Karen sent 27 text messages. Some angry, some pretending not to be angry, all of them demanding. Your father's disappointed. The family's asking where you are. You'll regret this someday. I didn't respond to any of them. I turned off my phone and ate mac and cheese in Lacey's cousin's apartment while people played board games and passed around wine. I felt guilty. Of course I did. But I also felt something else. Something new. Something like air. Christmas was harder. Karen left voicemails this time. Long, venom-laced messages. So this is who you've become? You think you're better than us. She accused me of brainwashing myself, of being disrespectful, of trying to hurt her on purpose. I cried after the third one, but I didn't call back. Dina helped me put language to the thing I'd lived through. She told me about emotional neglect. About control disguised as care. About parentification and chronic fear, and how children adapt to survive abuse by blaming themselves because it's the only power they think they have. We talked about my dad. About the way he disappeared into silence. About how that silence can be its own kind of violence. About how I always hoped he'd save me, even when I knew he wouldn't. I stopped calling them. Stopped answering. I watched other students FaceTime their moms while walking to class and felt a hollow ache in my chest, but I didn't want that kind of mother anymore. I met new people. Some of them even became friends. There was Marcus from political science, who noticed I never joined study groups and just started sitting next to me like it was normal. There was Zoya from the dorm 2 floors down, who brought over banana bread and said, "You seem lonely." That's not a crime, you know. But the person who really cracked me open was Kate. Kate was a junior, a film major who wore eyeliner like armor and chain-smoked outside the art building. I met her at a campus poetry reading. I wasn't there on purpose. I had wandered in by accident looking for a bathroom. But she read a poem about surviving her mother's suicide attempt, and I couldn't move. Afterward, she looked at me and said, "You've got the look." "What look?" I asked. "The one people get when they grew up scared and never got over it." We got coffee. Then more coffee. Then hours of talking. I told her things I'd never told anyone. About the juice glass punishment. About the bruises. About the notebook hidden in the air vent. She told me her dad had been an alcoholic with a mean streak and a silver tongue. She showed me the scar on her arm from the time he slammed a door on it. We didn't try to fix each other. We just sat in the wreckage together. Therapy helped. But Kate helped in a different way. She taught me how to breathe through a flashback. How to laugh without checking the room first. How to yell when you're angry, instead of swallowing it and calling it your fault. That spring, I officially changed my major from environmental studies to psychology. Karen would have hated it. I didn't tell her. I got a part-time job at a bookstore off campus. The owner, Gary, was this grumpy ex-hippie with a love for rare editions and no filter. He told me on day one, "You look like you've seen some shit. Good. Makes you interesting." He paid in cash and let me take home any book that hadn't sold in 3 months. I read everything. Trauma theory, memoirs, survival stories. I started to see myself in other people's words. And I kept going to therapy. Every week. Even when I didn't want to. Especially then. By the end of sophomore year, I realized I hadn't heard my mother's voice in almost 12 months. And I didn't miss it. Not really. My dad emailed once. Just a line, "Hope you're doing well." I stared at it for a long time. Then deleted it. I was no longer the girl who begged for approval. I didn't need them to validate my life anymore. I didn't need them to notice I was gone. Because for the first time in my life, I was finally here. By the time I turned 27, I thought I had put enough distance between myself and the woman who raised me that her voice no longer had the power to rattle me. I'd spent nearly a decade in Seattle, finished school, gone through hundreds of therapy sessions, and built a life I actually recognized as mine. I met Jonah when I was 25. He wasn't some fairy tale hero. He didn't rescue me from my past or fix me. He was just consistent. He made French toast on Sundays. He listened, even when I didn't make sense. When I froze up during conflict, he waited instead of pushing. I didn't have to become someone else to be loved, and that was a brand new experience. We got married quietly. No big wedding. No traditional white dress. Just us, a few friends, and a courthouse ceremony with Thai takeout afterward. I never told my mother about the wedding. She found out through my cousin Laura, and when she emailed me about it, all she wrote was, "So this is how you choose to do things now." I didn't respond. A year later, I found out I was pregnant. It was early, just 5 weeks in, but I already felt changed. I wasn't glowing or anything. Mostly I was tired and a little scared, but I remember thinking, this is the start of something new. Something not built on fear. Jonah cried when I told him. I laughed through tears. And then I lost the baby. It happened suddenly, bleeding, cramping, ER visits. They called it a spontaneous miscarriage. "It's more common than you think," the doctor said gently. But that didn't make it easier. My body had failed to hold on to something I already loved. I felt hollow. Ashamed. Grief sat in my lungs like smoke. I wasn't planning to tell Karen. But I did. Some part of me, maybe a wounded fragment, still wanted her to be a mother to me. I told her over the phone. I sat on the floor of our laundry room, knees to my chest, whispering it into the receiver. She paused, then said, "It happens. The body isn't ready. You'll try again." No warmth. No pause to let it sink in. No, I'm sorry, or that must be so painful. Just her usual brand of medicalized coldness. I hung up in silence. Jonah found me still sitting there 15 minutes later, the phone still in my hand. He didn't ask what she said. He just pulled me up and held me while I cried. The next morning, she emailed me a list of vitamins. Then links to fertility books. Then an article titled Miscarriage, When the Body Doesn't Listen. No message. Just the links. After that, I didn't speak to her for months. And then, just before I turned 28, I was pregnant again. I was cautious, more guarded this time. I didn't let myself imagine nursery themes or baby names. Not yet. But this pregnancy stuck. The heartbeat came early. The nausea was hellish. I craved peanut butter and hated coffee, which Jonah mourned more than I did. At 16 weeks, I decided to tell them. Not because I wanted to, but because I thought I should. Because despite everything, I still felt this pressure. This weird cultural magnetism that said you have to tell your family when a baby's on the way. So I called. Karen picked up on the third ring. "Hello." "Hi, Mom. I just wanted to tell you something. I'm pregnant." Pause. Then, "Are you going to work after giving birth?" That was her response. Not congratulations. Not how far along are you. Not is everything okay this time? Just an interrogation disguised as interest. I blinked at the phone. Yes, I said. Eventually. But not right away. She made a sharp sound, something between a laugh and a scoff. Of course. Another modern woman who thinks maternity leave is a vacation. I ended the call. That night, she sent her first email. Subject line, something to consider. It was a link to a $75 hardcover book called The Smart Mother's Strict Order. The subtitle was How to Create Structure, Respect, and Authority from Day One. The author was some child-rearing expert who'd never had kids but specialized in behavior modification for toddlers. A week later, another package arrived at our door. Books, printed articles, and a handwritten note in Karen's tight angled cursive. Don't wait too long to establish hierarchy. Children must understand authority early, or you will regret it for the rest of your life. Love, Mom. I felt sick. She was already trying to get inside my child's head, before the child was even born. When I told her I was planning to practice gentle parenting, she actually called me for the first time in months. I let it go to voicemail. She left a 3-minute message that began with, "That is the single stupidest decision you've ever made." She called gentle parenting hippie garbage, said I was going to raise a spoiled narcissist, accused me of being obsessed with being my child's friend instead of being a parent. "You're weak," she said. "You always have been. And now you'll create someone even weaker." I saved the voicemail. Jonah wanted me to block her. "She doesn't get to do this anymore," he said. But I wasn't ready. I told him I needed time. What I couldn't explain was that some tiny part of me still believed maybe, just maybe, if I did this right, she'd finally see me as a good mother. As enough. Around that time, I joined a pregnancy support group in the city. It met on Thursdays at a community center that smelled like lavender and peanut butter crackers. There were 7 of us at first, all at different stages. Some single, some on their 3rd kid. All of them came with baggage, but none of them carried shame the way I did. That's where I met Talia. She was in her early 30s, tough as hell, and had grown up in a Pentecostal home where discipline meant belts and Bibles. She got out at 19, moved across the country, and was now pregnant after a long struggle with IVF. We bonded over the feeling of growing a child in a body that had once felt like the enemy. One night after group, I told her about Karen. I expected her to say something soft or supportive. Instead, she said, "You know she's grooming you to parent like her, right?" I blinked. What? All the books. The calls. The rules. It's control. Just dressed up as advice. I sat there stunned. Because I hadn't used that word, control, in a long time. And I definitely never applied it to what was happening now. "She doesn't get to tell your baby who they're allowed to be," Talia said. "Only you and your kid decide that." Something cracked inside me that night. A truth I hadn't let in. Karen wasn't reacting out of fear or concern. She was trying to replicate herself. Through me. Into my child. That's when I started writing everything down. Every email, every package, every voicemail. I created a file on my laptop called For My Sanity. It was my way of keeping record. Of drawing a line between then and now. Karen escalated. She sent Jonah a message through LinkedIn. A professional message. Cold and coded. She wrote, "If Emily refuses to take discipline seriously, I hope at least one of you will protect that child from future instability." He blocked her. Then came the box. Unmarked. No return address. Inside was a folded baby onesie. Pale yellow. Embroidered with the words, "Obedience is love." There was no note. I threw it in the trash. And then I sat on the floor of the kitchen and cried. For the baby I lost. For the one I was carrying. For every part of me that still hoped to be loved by a woman who only knew how to control. The baby shower was supposed to be a celebration. A line in the sand between everything that came before and everything that would come after. A place where I could be surrounded by the people who helped me crawl out of the wreckage, people who saw me, not the edited version Karen always tried to present to the world. My friends rented out this cozy event space downtown, warm lighting, exposed brick, the works. Talia handled the decorations, little eucalyptus garlands and pastel banners that said, "Welcome, little one." Lacey flew in from San Francisco. Zoya and her girlfriend made handmade party favors, lavender sugar scrub in glass jars. We even hired a local catering company that served bite-sized versions of comfort food, mini grilled cheeses, mac and cheese cups, slider-sized burgers with chipotle aioli. It was $1,200 for the space and food, and every dollar was a gift from people who genuinely cared. I didn't invite Karen. I made that choice clearly. I hadn't spoken to her directly in months. But my cousin Laura had let it slip, accidentally or not, I'll never know that the shower was happening. So I shouldn't have been surprised when she showed up. She walked in halfway through the gift opening, wearing a steel gray pantsuit like she was attending a board meeting. I saw her before she saw me. Her eyes swept the room like a radar, judging the font on the banners, the casual dress code, the unstructured seating. I stood frozen. Jonah had gone out to grab extra drinks. I was alone at the center of the room, holding up a tiny baby carrier someone had gifted us. When Karen spotted me, she gave a tight, polite smile and started walking over. Talia intercepted her halfway. "Hi, this is a private event," she said evenly. "I'm her mother," Karen replied. Talia didn't move. "And I'm one of the people who helped her survive that." Karen's smile didn't move. "That's adorable. Now, if you'll excuse me." I waved Talia off. I could feel eyes on us, tension building. This wasn't the place for another war. I forced a smile and said, "Hi, Mom." She leaned in and air-kissed me like I was some colleague she barely tolerated. "Well," she said, looking around. "This is quaint." I didn't respond. Then it began. The passive-aggressive comments. The remarks about the banner font being childish. The food being unrefined. The color palette being Instagrammable but not timeless. I ignored her. Tried to keep the focus on the people who were actually happy for me. But then she handed me her gift. It was heavy, like disproportionately heavy. Wrapped in matte black paper, no bow. Inside, a tattered hardback book with faded red leather binding. The title was embossed in Gothic script. Discipline Above All. Raising Morality in the Modern Child by W.J. Brannock, published in 1952. I opened the cover and found a yellowing note tucked inside. "For when you realize you're not so smart. You'll thank me later. Love, Mom." I froze. Talia saw the look on my face and came over. She read the note over my shoulder. "You're kidding me," she whispered. But Karen wasn't done. She was walking around the room now, making conversation with my friends like she owned the place. I overheard her talking to Zoya's girlfriend. "This is all cute, but a child raised without structure turns into a child who doesn't respect you. And disrespect is the beginning of societal decay." I clenched my jaw. Then she made her way to Maya, a friend from my therapy group who had brought a rainbow onesie with "Loved from the Start" written across the front. I was across the room when it happened, but I saw Maya's face shift. Confused, then disturbed. I made my way over as Maya walked away. "What did she say to you?" Maya looked uncomfortable. "You sure you want to know?" I nodded. She said, and I quote, "As soon as he grows up, I'm going to re-educate him." The floor fell out from under me. I turned around. Karen was back by the snack table, sipping water like she was at a networking event. I walked over calmly, every cell in my body shaking. "You need to leave. Now." She blinked at me, the fake smile still in place. "Excuse me. You heard me. Leave. You weren't invited. You weren't welcome. You made that clear a long time ago. I am your mother." "No," I said louder this time. "You are a woman who thinks control is the same thing as love, and I'm not letting you do to my child what you did to me." People had stopped talking. The room had gone quiet. Karen set her glass down slowly. "You're being hysterical. Maybe the hormones." I laughed. "No. Not hormones. Boundaries." She straightened. "You're going to regret this. One day he'll act out. He'll scream at you. He'll break things. And you'll wish you had listened to me." I looked her dead in the eyes. "If that ever happens, I'll take him to therapy. Not to you." She stared at me like she didn't recognize the person standing in front of her. "I'm serious," I said. "No respect, no access. That includes visits, photos, phone calls. You don't get to weaponize your version of love around my son." Karen picked up her bag, adjusted her blazer, and walked out. I didn't follow. I turned around and saw Maya with her arms crossed, Zoya nodding like she'd just witnessed a final boss get defeated, and Talia already picking up the book Karen had gifted me. She dropped it in the trash like it was radioactive. Jonah walked in 5 minutes later, holding a case of LaCroix. Did I miss something? Everyone left. Later that night, after the cake and the hugs and the quiet cleanup, I sat on the floor of the nursery. I held one of the onesies someone had gifted us, bright orange with tiny foxes on it, and stared out the window. My son would never know what it was like to flinch at a knock on the door. He would never hear obedience is love as a lullaby. He would never be told that crying is weakness or that emotions are a threat, because I would make damn sure of it. I gave birth to Jaden on a gray Tuesday morning in late November, during one of those Pacific Northwest storms where the sky looks like it's trying to collapse. 12 hours of labor, a birth plan tossed out the window halfway through, and a wave of terror and awe the second they placed his tiny wrinkled body on my chest. He made a soft squeaking sound like a kitten and I thought, I'd die for you. Right now, no hesitation. Jonah cried harder than I did. We named him Jaden because it sounded soft but strong. What we wanted him to grow up to be. For the first 2 weeks, we were in this strange, exhausted bubble. Feeding around the clock. Watching him sleep with our hands on his chest just to feel him breathe. Every little cry had us up like soldiers. I had never been so tired and so in love at the same time. Then Karen showed up. She hadn't been invited. She didn't ask. She just appeared at our door with a bouquet of white lilies, a tight smile, and a small bag that looked like a baby gift. Jonah answered. I was breastfeeding in the other room. Who is it? I called, half asleep. He paused. Then, it's your mom. I nearly dropped Jaden. I hadn't spoken to her since the baby shower. She wasn't on the call list when he was born. I'd made that decision clear. Jonah even double-checked our digital records. She hadn't been given the hospital info. She must have found out through Laura again. Or worse, stalked my social media, which I thought I had locked down. She acted like nothing had happened. Where's my grandson? She said, brushing past Jonah like she still lived here. I came out with Jaden in my arms, still in pajamas, and stood between her and the bassinet. You need to leave, I said. She tilted her head. Don't be ridiculous. I came all this way. I'm not sick. I washed my hands in the car. I just want to see him. You're not welcome here. She blinked, as if the sentence confused her. Then her voice dropped, icy. Fine. You've made your position clear. She placed the bag on the table and walked out. Inside the bag was a stuffed lamb and an envelope with an unsigned card. You can't keep him from his real family forever. I shredded it. That should have been the end. But it was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Karen showed up 3 more times. Once when I was home alone. Once when Jonah was taking Jaden on a walk. She'd leave packages, diapers we hadn't asked for, notes with parenting tips, a bib that read Nana's favorite. All of it felt like bait. We installed a video doorbell. Changed the locks. Warned our neighbors. Then came the cameras. We discovered the first one clipped inside a teddy bear. It had been placed in a small gift bag left on our porch, supposedly from a coworker of Jonah's named Tracy. We almost didn't open it. But Jonah was suspicious. It didn't match the other gifts we'd received. He cut open the stuffed bear and found the tiny black lens staring back at us from inside its stitched smile. We went numb. He checked the bear's stitching. The thread color didn't match the original factory pattern. Someone had reopened it and sewn it shut again. We reported it to the police. They opened a file but said unless we could prove who planted it, there was not much they could do at this point. Then, things escalated. An old friend of mine from undergrad, Jessa, messaged me out of nowhere. She had met Karen at a book club in Boston years ago, apparently, and got an email from her titled, Urgent, Emily's Well-Being and the Child's Safety. Jessa forwarded it to me. It was a 5-paragraph character assassination. She's always been emotionally unstable, it said. She refuses help. I fear for her son's development under these conditions. I stared at the screen, stomach flipping. Karen was trying to build a case behind my back. More reports came in. A guy from Jonah's old job got a LinkedIn message, again, from Karen, posing as a concerned in-law. One of my neighbors asked me, awkwardly, is your mom okay? She came by asking if she could just get a glimpse of the baby from the sidewalk. And then one day, I came home to find an envelope on our welcome mat. No stamp, no postmark. Inside was a check for $2,000, signed by my father, Tom. No note. Just the check. It made my blood run cold. Jonah wanted to burn it. I took a photo and logged it with the rest of the evidence I had started collecting. Emails, voicemails, printed messages, screenshots, camera footage. We called a lawyer. Her name was Amanda Blackwell, a soft-spoken but sharp-minded attorney who specialized in family law and harassment cases. I laid out everything. The stuffed animal camera, the drop-ins, the third-party manipulation, the unsolicited money. Amanda didn't flinch. You're not the first, she said. But you're doing everything right. Document it all. Every detail. 2 months later, we were served. Karen and Tom had filed a petition under Washington's Grandparent Visitation Rights statute. The language was vague. We, as the child's biological family, seek reasonable and structured access to maintain familial bonds for the psychological benefit of the child. They claimed I was isolating Jaden, that I was emotionally unstable, that I was damaging multi-generational connection. I couldn't breathe. Amanda reviewed the documents, her face expressionless. They're hoping you'll cave. Most people do. But with the evidence we have, we'll bury this. The hearing date was set for 6 weeks later. 6 weeks of anxiety so thick I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, could barely nurse without shaking. I was terrified. Not of losing custody. Amanda reassured me that wasn't on the table, but of losing peace. Of being forced to let Karen back into our lives, even in small, supervised doses. I started waking up in the middle of the night, convinced she was outside. I kept checking Jaden's baby monitor like a compulsion. Then something happened that almost broke me. Jaden got sick. Just a cold, the pediatrician said. But he was only 3 months old, and his cough sounded like it came from somewhere too deep in his tiny chest. He had a slight fever. We spent a night in the ER just to be safe. While we were gone, someone rang our doorbell. The Ring camera caught it. It was Karen, standing outside in a long coat, holding a grocery bag. When no one answered, she left it on the porch and walked away. Inside the bag, homemade soup, parenting books, and another letter. When you break, and you will, I'll still be here, ready to help. I saved it. And I broke. I cried harder than I had since Jaden's birth. Jonah held me on the nursery floor and said, "She thinks love is control, and she's trying to teach you the same damn lesson. We're not letting her win." We didn't. The court date arrived. We walked into the King County Courthouse with 4 neatly labeled binders: visits, gifts, messages, witnesses. Karen and Tom sat across from us in the courtroom. She wore navy, a pearl necklace. He looked tired, smaller than I remembered. Their lawyer made the case that all children deserve access to their extended family, that cutting off grandparents is an act of emotional retaliation, and that intergenerational bonds are vital to moral development. Then Amanda stood. She presented the footage. The bare camera. The porch letters. The check. The unsolicited visits. The LinkedIn messages. She quoted the voicemail about re-educating Jaden. When she finished, she said one line I'll never forget. "This is not love. This is intrusion." The judge asked a few questions. Then she looked at Karen and Tom and said, "You have shown no understanding of healthy boundaries, no remorse for your actions, and no capacity to accept that your adult daughter is now a parent with her own values. This petition is denied, with prejudice." With prejudice, meaning they couldn't file it again. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in 6 months. They left the courtroom without a word. Karen didn't even glance at me. I've kept the court transcript in my safe ever since. Jaden's 4 now. And he doesn't know them. And he never will. We left Seattle on a rainy morning, which felt right somehow. I held Jaden in the back seat while Jonah locked the apartment door for the last time. He looked back only once. I didn't look at all. We had spent the last 3 months preparing for this. Selling furniture, closing accounts, wiping our digital footprint. Amanda, our lawyer, connected us with a private security consultant named Marcus Jane, who specialized in helping survivors of domestic harassment rebuild safely. He wasn't the typical tech guy. Ex-cybercrime unit, mid-40s, all black clothes and quiet intensity. When he heard everything we'd been through, Karen's stalking, the lawsuit, the messages, he nodded and said, "We'll make it so they never find you." We spent $18,000 total. $4,500 on the move, $6,800 in legal fees to file the name change, rework documentation, and establish guardianship protection for Jaden. Another $3,200 went to Marcus and his team, changing email servers, encrypting our data, scrubbing our address history from public record sites. We even replaced our phones. Burned the old ones in a fire pit at Zoya's house. We picked a small city in Colorado, not too big, not too small. Jonah got a remote role with a climate tech company. I found part-time work at a literacy nonprofit. The air was clearer. The people didn't know us. That part mattered more than anything. We changed our last name to Wilder. It felt symbolic. Free. Something no one in my family had ever called themselves. We updated all records, driver's licenses, social security, tax IDs. Amanda made sure everything was airtight. She even arranged for a cease and desist to be sent to Karen and Tom, just to be explicit. Any attempt to contact the Wilders will result in immediate legal action. We never heard from them again. The first few months in the new place were tense. I kept checking windows. Jumped when the doorbell rang. Marcus had installed a system that alerted us anytime our names were searched in public databases. The first alert came 2 weeks after the move, Karen's lawyer doing a search. Nothing more came after that. And slowly, we exhaled. Jaden was just over a year old by then. Walking like a drunk sailor, babbling nonstop, fascinated by spoons and cardboard boxes. His laugh came from somewhere deep, like his whole little body was in on the joke. He didn't flinch at sudden noises. He didn't hesitate before reaching for things. That's when I knew he wasn't afraid. He didn't know fear the way I had. I remember the first time he cried in public. At a library story hour, another toddler had grabbed a toy from him and Jaden lost it. Not in a meltdown, just full toddler wailing. The other mother looked awkward. I braced myself for judgment, for comments, for shame. But no one said anything. No one shamed me. And I didn't shush him. I got down on his level, met his eyes and said, "You're allowed to feel upset. But we don't hit. Let's try again." It worked. I cried in the car afterward. We met new people. Neighbors. Parents from the co-op playgroup. One woman, Maria, had 2 kids and ran a local mom circle called the Birch Collective, focused on gentle parenting, trauma-informed caregiving, and community support. She invited me in like I'd always belonged. We sat on rugs in church basements drinking herbal tea while toddlers screamed and climbed things. We talked about things that would have gotten me punished as a child: emotional regulation, bodily autonomy, saying no. I listened more than I spoke at first. But eventually I opened up. Not all of it. Just enough. Maria became a friend. The real kind. The kind who texts at midnight when your baby's teething. The kind who offers her living room when your pipes burst. The kind who looks at you during a chaotic group snack time and says, "You're doing amazing." We weren't rich. We weren't fancy. But we were free. Jaden grew. We got him a tiny wooden kitchen for his 2nd birthday. He loved it. For weeks, he served us invisible soup and plastic strawberries, wearing a little apron with his name stitched across it. He had a fire truck phase. A dinosaur phase. I hate green food phase. Each one was a window into his mind, and every time I saw him express something without fear, I felt like I was healing a piece of myself. Once, after he accidentally knocked over his milk and burst into tears, I instinctively reached for a towel and said, "It's just a mess. We clean it up. No big deal." He stopped crying immediately, and I had to walk into the bathroom and cry silently, because I knew, without a doubt, that if I had done that at his age, I would have been screamed at, humiliated, shamed. But not him. Never him. We took parenting classes through the Birch Collective. Jonah and I both. Classes with names like Rupture and Repair and Parenting from a Nervous System Lens. We learned that kids don't need perfect parents. They need attuned ones. Ones who apologize. Ones who co-regulate. Ones who say, "You're safe," and actually mean it. By the time Jaden was 4, he had never once been hit, belittled, or punished with silence. He knew how to name his feelings, sometimes better than I did. He once told me after I lost my temper during a stressful morning, "Mama, your face got sharp. Are you okay?" That sentence broke me open. We had a ritual. Every night before bed, we sat on the floor and did 3 things. One thing we loved about the day, one thing that was hard, and one thing we were grateful for. Jaden always said some version of playing with daddy or banana muffins. But sometimes he'd surprise me. One night he said, "I'm grateful my home is safe." I asked where he learned that. "You say it sometimes," he shrugged. I realized he was right. I did. We'd spend weekends hiking. Jonah taught Jaden to spot mushrooms. I taught him how to plant things and wait for them to grow. We didn't teach him to be obedient. We taught him to be in tune. To trust his gut. To ask questions. To speak up. And I didn't feel guilt anymore. Not for cutting Karen out. Not for burning bridges. Not for changing our name. Because I had chosen to protect something bigger than reconciliation. I had chosen my son. And for the first time in my entire life, I knew exactly what motherhood was. It wasn't obedience. It wasn't discipline. It wasn't fear. It was waking up at 3 a.m. because someone had a nightmare and holding them until their breathing slowed. It was apologizing when you snapped. It was celebrating who your child actually is, not who you want them to be. It was knowing that the hardest part of parenting isn't control. It's letting go. And I let go. Of Karen. Of Tom. Of the child inside me who once believed she was unlovable unless she was perfect. I buried that girl in the ashes of our old life, and I built something new out of the embers. His name is Jaden.